This sitting is resumed. Oh, yeah, she gonna make that. Okay. Huh? Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I would wish to, at the outset, ask for leave to also be able to lead as a cognate debate the Broadcasting Amendment Bill 2019 as well. Both bills are inextricably linked, and therefore I believe that we should be able to do the two of them together.
Make a second that.
The question is that order number 12 and number 13 be done as a cognate debate. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Order 12 and 13 will be done as requested. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the outset, sir, I want to indicate to the chamber that this debate would have started in the other place, in the Senate chamber. It would have been led by the Minister of Information, Broadcasting and Public Affairs. It was done in that place as a cognate debate, and hence the application for leave to be able to address this chamber and to be able to speak to this debate here today in that manner. Sir, Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation is an entity which falls under the purview of the Ministry of Information, Broadcasting and Public Affairs. It is an entity that I believe most, if not all of us in this chamber, have had the opportunity to enjoy the content in our homes over the course of several decades. I can't say that today, sir, many of us still watch CBC as perhaps the first option in relation to the dissemination of media and certainly public information, because, sir, there are so many other mediums of technology which are now available to all of us. But this media house, which was created by an act of parliament back in 1963, initially would have began its operations in the area of radio broadcasting, and by the following year, it would have added television to its scope and to its functions. Many of us over the years would have had the opportunity to witness several levels of programming content. The Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation has provided not just the enjoyment of programs like Days of Our Lives, sir, where many Barbadians would have rushed home for 6 o'clock to be able to watch what was happening in that arena, but it has also provided over the years a medium through which public affairs and things which are happening across Barbados are streamed directly into our homes, both through radio and also television. I sat on the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation's board for about 3 years, sir. During that time, Much of the same things that we will discuss here today plagued the board at that time. And I speak specifically, sir, to the issue of the debt situation of the corporation. While the MCTV component of the corporation has always been the entity which recorded significant revenue, generally the troubled financial situation of the corporation was a concern, sir, not only as today, but it has been a concern for successive administrations as well. The corporation has been operating at an annual loss of approximately $6 million for a considerable length of time. Back in 2006, the annual debt was around $89 million. In 2007, it was $72 million. And by 2008, it was $73 million. By 2017, it had accumulated a total of over $100 million. And a review of the current performance continues to show that the entity continues to struggle to improve its performance financially. Sometime last year, sir, we would have had to approve a supplementary allocation for the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, intended for CBC to be able to cover some $9.2 million, and this was to cover debts to overseas suppliers and also to local utility companies. This has been a challenge, sir, and one which I believe this administration we've all agreed that we have to confront in terms of being able to not just restructure the debt situation in the economy, but certainly to deal with a number of state-owned enterprises across the country, which for a long time have really, while people talk about it, has not been able to captivate the type of attention that has been required to do perhaps the real restructuring that has been needed to be able to turn back the hands of time in terms of the debt situation of these entities. In relation to the MCTV service, sir, which I would have indicated is really the only entity at CBC that is in a good situation, although not in the best situation that it could be. And it is the principal source of revenue. Between 2015 to 2018, MCTV's annual revenue was approximately 6 times that which was earned by TV8 and approximately 5 times the earning of radio. The challenge, however, for the corporation is that households now have other mediums through which to watch television, to be able to have news disseminated to them. And as a consequence of the competition and the failure by the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation to digitize its services, it has obviously therefore not maintained its competitiveness, and therefore at this stage is now in dire need of significant sums of investment. It is interesting, sir, that when this administration came to office in 2018, we would have embarked on a discussion with the country regarding the need to have an economic recovery plan for the Barbados economy. And in the course of preparing ourselves to make certain decisions with respect to which entities we would continue to operate and which entities may have to engage in a series of restructuring exercises, we asked the general public to weigh in on the matter, so that again, as we came to office, we always said that we would try to discourse with the public in relation to making any significant decisions. And what is interesting, sir, is that when the poll was done, the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation obtained the lowest score from amongst 4,600 Barbadians who responded, indicating, sir, that the future of the corporation in its current form was in dire need of intervention. In other words, sir, this was not an entity that most Barbadians felt was a profit-making entity, or certainly meeting the standard to which most Barbadians, based on the technology available to them presently, would want to continue if they had a choice available to them that they wanted the government of Barbados to continue to spend on. It therefore became clear to members on this side that the time had now come for us to be able to do what successive administrations had not ventured to do before, or even if they had attempted to do it, that we needed to really call a spade, sir, and make some very harsh decisions in relation to the losses that have been experienced by the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. One of the fundamental changes that it was recognized that would have to be made was that the organizational structure of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation would have to be impacted. And sir, I want to reiterate for the purpose of this discussion, but also to the country, that leadership does matter, whether it is in a prime ministerial position, whether it is in relation to respective ministries, whether it is in relation to the leadership of educational entities, whether it is in relation to the Transport Board, whether it is in relation to the Ministry of Health, sir. I believe we have come within the last decade in particular to recognize more than anything that we have to ensure that we have the right persons to do the right job. The days of square pegs in round holes, sir, the days of being partisan for the sake of being partisan, to place persons in positions just to be able to hold office and be comfortable, sir, those days have come to a sorry end. And I believe that if nothing more in this exercise that we've all learned in the last few years, it is that, sir, leadership does matter. The failure to have addressed this issue over the years has obviously almost crippled the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. And as we embark on a series of restructuring efforts across the state-owned enterprises, and certainly even in ministries without the state-owned enterprises, continuing to look at how do we find savings, or how do we ensure that we restructure organizations and look at our human resources, it is becoming more and more evident that we have to find and the staffing to be able to take a lot of these entities forward. As a consequence, sir, one of the first priorities that this administration has placed on the table through this ministry has been to look at the organizational structure of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. And let me just say, sir, that presently you have a corporation which has a board of management, which the minister would basically ensure the corporation, sir, has a group of members who consist of the chairman, the deputy chairman, and such other members ranging from 5 to 9 as the minister may appoint from time to time. You also have, sir, a general manager who traditionally has also received the approval of the minister. And one of the things, sir, that has presented a significant challenge for the organization is that the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation's services require a more in-depth relationship to be had by the persons who are involved in the management structure. At present, the executive management of the institution is headed by the general manager. The post presently is vacant, and I believe the substantive manager of the archives department is currently acting as the general manager. But what is proposed to the changes for the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, sir, by these amendments are very specific, and I believe that the types of changes envisioned will certainly allow us to start the process of being able to restructure the organizations and begin to see the organization as one that can actually be more commercial in its operations and certainly more lucrative for the country long term. It is therefore proposed, sir, that the organizational structure of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation should be changed to abolish the post of general manager and to create the post of chief executive officer and the post of chief operations officer. So therefore, sir, we will be now splitting one post into two positions to be able to allow additional support for the chief executive officer of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. That is one of the major changes, sir, that is proposed by this particular amendment to the bill. The other area, sir, is that we recognize that given the competition that is out there, that the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation needs to be in a position to enter into the business of digital services and information technology communications, either in its own right or through a subsidiary. And we recognize that, sir, because times have changed and there are several players in the marketplace who are offering services that are more competitive to our consumers, sir, and it is creating significant problems for the corporation. The third change to the legislation relates to the definition of broadcasting services, and we've sought to broaden the definition to include more modern technological services. So in essence, sir, the direction that we are seeing for the corporation is one that allows it to, first of all, have a structure of leadership that allows now for the vision that this administration has for the corporation to be brought to the fore, that you have a further restructuring exercise that will take place over the course of the next couple of months. As you would know, we were able to start the restructuring process in the last year with a view to reducing the staff complement, because the reality, sir, is that even when you compare the current staff complement to some of the major broadcasting entities overseas, we are still in a situation where the staff complement of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation is significantly higher than any other operation, whether similar or even larger. And therefore, the technology has allowed us to be able to reduce the number of persons who are employed by the corporation, therefore carrying up the cost to the taxpayers. But it also has created several opportunities for persons who have worked within the entity for several years to now be able to offer back their services on a part-time basis. In another life, sir, I had the opportunity to work with several staff of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation as someone who is very involved in the field of entertainment. Many of the persons at the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation were very instrumental in working behind the scenes for several music videos that I would have produced over the years. The quality, sir, I must say, was far superior to what we may have been streamed into our households. And it basically said to me that particularly when you give these persons who had worked there the opportunity outside of the confines of the technology that was in the space at the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, and you allowed them to rent other equipment to be able to supplement for these types of videos, the end product that was received, sir, spoke volumes in terms of their ability. I therefore have always felt that the persons who have worked there are highly skilled, but in many cases the entity, because it has been losing so much money over the years, was never really able to keep up with improvements to the technology for the use by its staff. And therefore I have had that first-hand knowledge to be able to see what the staff have been capable of producing. Many of them, sir, also have worked with other persons in the private sector. They have, whether it's cameramen, directors, they've all been engaged, even when entities come from overseas involved in the film industry. Many of them were also able to be engaged in that way as well. And so therefore, the opportunities that exist for persons now to be able to exploit their services and their talent with this type of restructuring exercise, sir, I believe will speak volumes in the next few years. The fact is, sir, nobody likes to know that when this restructuring exercise takes place that people are out of employment. Certainly this administration would have been saying to the last administration on several occasions that steps needed to be taken to start the restructuring process. That had fallen on deaf ears repeatedly. Sir, I also recall budget after budget, the then Minister of Finance coming to this chamber and indicating that in discussions with whether it was the International Monetary Fund, special teams of advisors, that attempts were being made to restructure and to modernize several of our state-owned enterprises. Sir, we came to office, and it is no mystery to the public, to the international community, that many of the things that the last administration had been told that it needed to do in order to make a number of these entities profitable and to basically stop the continuing decline in revenue that the last administration failed to do, sir. But you know what, sir? We are not afraid to bell the cat. And I honestly believe that in the course of the next few years, when these changes have been given the opportunity to have a good run in terms of the leadership of the institutions, and that we've been able to achieve a number of the things that this administration intends, I think that the persons both who have been laid off, but also the persons who then will have the opportunity to be hired back in some capacity, or they themselves be able to offer back their services to a more efficient Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, that they will reflect on this moment, sir, as a very defining moment in the history of this country. Sir, I believe that there are a number of views in relation to the future of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. I know there are some who feel that it should perhaps have been privatized. There's some who believe that we should restructure. Sir, the fact of the matter is that something has to be done. And we would have embarked on a series of consultations to be able to look at the best way to be able to modernize the entity, to be able to look even at the Government Information Service, which also offers the services to us for public communication, to look at how we can scale down that department as well, sir, with a view to being able to marry a number of the services with the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. Again, there is no one solution to a problem that has been long-standing, but I believe we have to start somewhere, sir, in the process of making this restructuring exercise work. We have to recognize that if we are to be competitive, if we are to embrace the technology that exists, if we are to reduce our expenditure on wages and pensions, then we have a responsibility, not just to this generation, sir, but to future generations, to ensure that we do the right thing in relation to making some very, very difficult decisions that have now become necessary at this particular juncture in our history. Sir, we also created a think tank, an advisory group, which was done under the Barbados Broadcasting Authority, where we looked at reviewing the terms and conditions of that particular piece of legislation. We looked to countries such as Australia and to Canada. And earlier this year, the think tank and advisory group created by the Barbados Broadcasting Authority submitted a report entitled The Examination of the Future of the Broadcasting Industry. The report spoke to the inadequacy of the definition of broadcast in CAP 274B, which is the Barbados Broadcasting Authority Act, and to the implications of the advent of the Internet Protocol television. It spoke to the new media services that have been created and to other developments that shape the modern broadcast industry. Consultation was also sought, sir, from the Copyright Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, and they made a number of observations and recommendations, one of which, sir, we have embraced in relation to the Barbados Broadcasting Act amendment, which broadens the definition of broadcast in Cap 274B, as well as the definition of broadcasting services in Cap 276. Modern technology has made it possible for the ordinary private citizen to diffuse information, opinions, and other content to audiences anywhere in the world. And therefore, the proposed new definition of broadcast for the purpose of the Broadcasting Act is articulated in such a way as to exclude the non-commercial actions of private citizens. The new definition, sir, in the Barbados Broadcasting Authority Amendment reads as follows, that any transmission of programs, whether or not encrypted, by radio waves or other means of telecommunication, or by other electronic delivery for reception by the public by means of broadcasting receiving apparatus, but does not include any such transmission of programs that is made solely for performance or display in a public place. Sir, these minor amendments to the legislation, while appearing very simple, will have long-term implications for the viability of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. And I believe it will enable the corporation to reduce the losses that are currently impacting on the entity, and certainly allow greater content and wider content to be able to be fueled from both international, regional, and local stakeholders, sir. It is in that context, therefore, sir, that I would want to just also speak briefly to an area which I believe we have been sadly missing over the years in terms of the ability to create content that is relevant to educating the wider population about our history. I believe there are a number of persons out there who have the potential to create the type of content that would help to build out a national consciousness for Barbadians. We have to accept that the way in which young people in particular receive information nowadays is in a very visual way. And the type of technology that, and the cost of technology that once existed has been significantly reduced. Most young people today, sir, can create really good content on smartphones, and therefore it lends itself to being able to create content for television. I certainly would want to see that the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, as it looks to position itself moving forward as a profitable entity, is able to engage a number of the young, bright entrepreneurs in this country who have invested significantly in various devices in terms of film, but also those young people who have been given the opportunity to learn skills that would allow them to capture Barbadian life, to capture things that are traditionally Barbadian, to be able to expose our culture to the rest of the world, sir. We have a lot of content, whether it is through radio or television, that influences us from outside, from North America, from Europe, sir. We have to reach a point where that content starts to look more like us. And while at the same time we have to ensure that our people are aware of what happens in other jurisdictions, there has to be a thrust towards ensuring that when you watch television, that you are able to capture your history in a visual way, that young people can learn about their history, take pride in where they have come from, have the clear opportunities to be able to know where they are going, and that there are success stories that are told, sir, through the medium of television. We have been saying when we were in opposition that, and we were critical of the last administration for not widening the platform in terms of opportunities at the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. There are several other channels that are available, and I believe that attempts are being made, certainly through the minister, to ensure that there are other licenses that can be granted for persons to be able to place their content and to also be engaged in generating advertising dollars from that particular medium. But sir, this is a serious effort that needs to be taken in relation to the way forward. The process has started in terms of the restructuring. It is in terms of CBC, it is one of the entities, one of several entities that this administration has started to look at under the BERT program in order to be able to address a number of the debt situations that we have found ourselves in. And I believe that this is but one in terms of pieces of legislation that will come to this chamber over the course of the next few months and certainly in the next year to be able to put the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation and other state-owned entities on good footing. Obviously, sir, there are other ministries that I know are going through that restructuring exercise. There are several Auditor General reports that speak to all of the infelicities that have taken place in a number of these state-owned organizations. And, sir, we have to deal with these issues frontally if we are going to save ourselves some monies for our future generations. So, sir, this debate is not one which I believe needs to be too drawn out, but I do believe that it is an important debate which gives others the opportunity, if they so wish, to be able to speak to infrastructural issues that this administration has had to come to office to be able to address, and certainly to be able to demonstrate to the country that this administration is serious about doing some things that have been delayed inordinately long in our society, which have impacted on our ability now to have the resources to ensure that whether it's housing, whether it is our social services, whether it is our medical services, that we are able to pay for the things that really are critical to our society. And so therefore, with those few words, I would beg to move that this bill do now pass.
Honourable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to lend my voice to this particular bill. You know, oftentimes I've heard people talk about Barbadians having short memories, and I remember quite well at the beginning of last year, there was a buzzword, and that buzzword was fit for purpose. It was all over the country. Things have to be fit for purpose. And so, Mr. Speaker, this bill is part and parcel of this government being able to make entities that fall underneath us fit for purpose. And so the amendments that are going to be passed very shortly are put in place to do just that. But the thing that bothers me most, Mr. Speaker, is that for many years, I am sure that many Barbadians like myself have often wondered why is it that an entity like CBC, or if we move across the Caribbean, an entity like LEAC, having no competition for many, many years, could still find itself unable to make a profit in a market where there was relatively no competition. Now, this speaks volumes of about two things. One, either the structure of it was not up to scratch, or is not up to scratch, or that we have a problem in being able to identify areas that we should capitalize on, and really what is the purpose of the things that we're doing. In the instance of CBC, if we are only talking pure finances, then the restructuring of this becomes more than crucial at this particular juncture. But in my mind, a television station and radio stations owned by government must look at its responsibility in being able to be that catalyst for change, that catalyst for giving people identity, that catalyst for letting people see the very best of themselves and to identify with that, be it through the music or be it through film. And so this presents us now with a new opportunity to do just that. Imagine, if you will, Mr. Speaker, our filmmakers finally having the opportunity to have their films shown on CBC TV. An opportunity that none of its competitors have at this particular point in time. We spend a lot of time, we talk about MCTV and all the other things, but I've always been one who wondered why in the past am I watching television in Barbados and seeing ads in Spanish and all of this sort of what I would call lunacy going on for many, many years. And we talk about culture penetration, and we talk about the way that people are being influenced by these outside influences and things, and we've not yet been able to say to ourselves, let us use CBC as that entity that shows us the best of ourselves. We have this at Christmas. You're going to get it in a few days' time for Independence. And probably sometimes at Easter we will have the stories of Jesus and crucifixion and all these things, but at particular points in time. And I'm saying that the time has come when we've got to get serious about something that was placed in the covenant of hope. And that is the idea of creating a new national consciousness. And if this entity called CBC is not going to be in the forefront of being able to create that new national consciousness, then I would have to ask, what relevance would it be? And so for me, this is a good day, because if we are going to seriously change its structure, change its format, change its purpose, then the whole idea of it not being a profit-making entity becomes a little bit more balanced when you look at the other things that it can do. Because you cannot always look at things in terms of dollars and cents. There comes a time when you have to look in terms of common sense. And the common sense approach, yes, Ms. B, have a look at the common sense. The common sense approach is to use this entity. You're talking about you're having problems with your young people. Why do you think you're having problems with your young people? Because your young people are following the footsteps and cultures of people outside of this country. Therefore, how do you counter that? By being able to show them who they are, to tell them about their history, to tell them about their icons, to tell them about the possibilities that are available for them living in Barbados and what Barbados has produced in the past and can produce in the future. Your music, your film, your documentaries, your discussions. How many of us get our children to sit down and to watch, well, not just documentaries, but discussions, more programs that are tailored towards having conversations that young people and children would be interested in. I remember as a young man, there was a program, I don't remember the name of it, but it was on CBC, that we would all gather around the television to see, and it was geared towards young children at that particular point in time. Nobody wanted to miss it. It was the same way that Red Fusion had children's party, and we would all gather around Red Fusion to listen to that. CBC had a program, I think it was in the 80s, I remember it well, I don't remember the name of the program though, but a lot of children in Barbados would get in front of CBC TV8 to watch this particular program. Then there were things where they were teaching people Spanish. So all of these interesting programs that were happening on CBC TV. But then with the advent of MCTV, I guess in an effort to expand, and as my colleague rightly said, bring some more financial benefit to it, it also opened the door for other people to pick up and to create some competition for us. And as we're moving forward, as the technology changes, CBC, if it wants to be relevant to the general public, it has to be able to change with the technology. And so in changing the structure of it, in making it more fit for purpose, getting the skills that are needed and upgrading the things that they need to upgrade, I think that this is a good thing. But I also like to say that if we are only going to be ending up regurgitating things from foreign countries, then this minister is going to have a problem, because it is going to be very important, and I cannot stress this enough. It is going to be very important that our creative people have the opportunity now, with the restructuring and the way how we look at it, of being able to use that platform. And I said it before, and I got to reiterate it, because I think sometimes things just pass through the ear and people don't get it. We must be able to use to our advantage CBC, both radio and television, to give them the exposure that is needed in a local market. And once you do that, you're also going to be able to inspire the next generation of great artists for this country. And so my few words are, I fully support the recommendations to make the changes. I am happy that this particular government has shown the intestinal fortitude to make the decisions that needed to be made a long time ago where CBC is concerned. But I also want to say that in going forward, we too must be able to support CBC, because it won't be able to do it on its own without the support of the general public. So that if we make all the changes in the world, but people still believe that they are more interested in things coming from outside of this country, then all of the changes that we make will amount to naught. So it is not just the management and the staff and the programming of CBC that has to play a part in making this work. It has to be the general public being able to recognize that there's lots and lots and lots of content there that has been used sparingly that we can get out. There's lots of content out there that has never come to the general public for one reason or the other. But there's a lot of content out there. And then there has to be creation of new content in order to be sustainable. And in doing so, that gives our young entrepreneurs within the film industry, within the music industry, within craft, within design and all these, an opportunity to use what is ours. And I want to stress on this, what is ours, to be able to give to the general public the knowledge of what presently exists in Barbados. Because as I go across the island, Mr. Speaker, I am totally blown away by the creativity, by the entrepreneurship that is being undertaken by a lot of our people, and not just young people. There are well-seasoned persons out there doing great things. But how do we know about it? A lot of things I've only known because I'm in this position now, and I get out on the road and I meet with people and I'm getting to see it. But the wider public does not even know half of the things that are happening in this country. You know, I've heard people saying and mentioning this all the time, and the minister responsible for tourism can tell you, We often sit in meetings and hear people telling us, oh, there's nothing for tourists to do in Barbados. You know, the place is boring. I beg to differ now. If CBC was doing the work that it should be doing, people would know. But at any time, you can leave and go into the Honourable Minister for St. Thomas's constituency to do what do you call it? Mud dog racing, all these sort of things, big wheel vehicles and all kind of things going through a gully. You know, you got all sorts of parties and all kind of things going on in some places that you wouldn't even dream that they have people transfer and transform gullies into exceptionally beautiful venues. Culinary arts. I mean, for those of you who had the opportunity to go to the Spirit of the Nation show, I have to talk about this. You know, a young man who came through the program did catering for the event. And you would not believe what I was exposed to, the craft that this young gentleman was able to take food, things that we take for granted, you know, like simple things like conkies. And it's not just in the banana skins as we would normally have it, but he had it done like if it was in an ice cream cone. I mean, and these are things that our young people are doing. and the presentation was beyond my wildest expectations. And I'm saying that these are the positive things, thank you, Minister, that we have to highlight. CBC should be out in the community, not just Q in the community. There has to be CBC in the community. I've said it on every time I get a chance, and I'm going to say it. There are shopkeepers across this country, some who have gone on, who are responsible for probably all of us in here being able to get a meal when the day comes. CBC should be out there highlighting these people. These are human interest programs. Yes, you can call them community icons, whatever, but these are the things that you need to do in order to build out that national consciousness that we're talking about. And if you want an example of how it has been done to perfection, all you have to do is to turn on your television at any particular point in time and watch American movies. In every single American movie, if it's a Western, it tells you about the great American West and what they were able to accomplish, even though they decimated the people that were there before them. But they celebrate that. But what they're doing, they're telling the next generation that this is who you are. This is what you can accomplish. World War II movies. Huh? But this is how you get people to buy into patriotism. You know, you got a picture like the Patriot and all these things that they're showing. And I'm saying that whilst we sit and we are fighting and grappling with a different kind of barbarian, the reason why you have that different type of barbarian, because you are not controlling the narrative. You are not the person who is socializing him. He's being socialized by inner city, and I'm going to say, by inner city, black America, and what they want you to see. But they have reason why they want you to see that. But it has to be a reason why they want Barbadians to see themselves for who they are, based on themselves. And so this, in some people's mind, might seem like a willy-nilly little poo-paw thing. But in my mind and in my heart, this is probably going to be one of the most transformative things that is going to happen in this country once we get people to understand that we have to be the ones who determine who we are in the eyes of the rest of the world. We have to be the ones who decide how we praise our God when Sundays come, or Saturday, or Monday, or Tuesday, or Wednesday. Not other people. We have to be the ones who decide what our morals and our ethics are. That's right. We are the craftsmen of our faith. And these cannot just be hollow words. They have to be things that we live by day after day after day. And if we are prepared to use the tools that are at our disposal, and have been at our disposal for eons now. 1974, they tell me, started. Before you were born, Minister, 10 years after me, which is good. But the point is, we have to now look at repurposing CBC. And though, yes, it must become economically viable, there are some things, as I said earlier, that money cannot buy or get done. But if you understand that you can change an entire nation by giving them an opportunity to see themselves, appreciate what they have been able to accomplish against all odds, I may say, because oftentimes when we have to have conversations about smaller and developing states like Barbados, one of the things that does not come up into the conversation, and people in this country and around the world are afraid to have the conversation, it is this. The majority of us, regardless if you like it or not, there's residue from slavery that our people still dealing with and still have to deal with. There's residue from colonialism that they're dealing with and still have to deal with. And then there's a persistent and consistent racism based on our skin color. I don't care, you Prime Minister, Governor General, who? You got this color here, you can face it. These are the things that we have to be able to talk about on the same CBC TV and discuss. Class problems in this country, we need to talk about it. The same way that people want to get on the side and talk about this politician did this and who's a thief and all. They got problems that need to talk about. But everybody frightened. Everybody frightened. But CBC has to be in the forefront of getting these conversations started. Get people to sit down. Sensible conversations. Thank you, Minister. Sensible ones. Not the kind of foolishness that I see on WhatsApp messages and a lot of nonsense. Sensible things that are going to bring the people of this country together so that we can move forward as what? Barbadians. One Barbados. Not a lot of political nonsense like what CBC was subjected to under another administration. It became what? A propaganda machine. A lot of nonsense. Nonsense people with nonsense ideas. We can get nonsense outcome. What I'm saying? That's why it turned into nonsense TV. You're right. Yes. You're right. We found ourselves in the nonsense sphere. I agree. And so now, we have an opportunity to turn it around and use what we have for the betterment of all Barbadians. And I'm going to stress on all Barbadians, regardless of color, class, creed, political persuasion, religious thought, all Barbadians. And I'm hoping that the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of the Creative Economy, Culture and Sports, the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry of Elder Affairs, I can call every single one of them, will use the opportunity to use CBC, radio and television, to speak to the people of this country. Do not allow them to stop out there and make judgments based on hearsay or what other people say, but to actually engage with you in a way that you can't do it from the other providers, but you can do it using CBC. I said it before and I say it again in closing. We are in the information age. The ability to educate people cannot be seen as just formal education in terms of going into a classroom to do math and English and history and geography and physics and all these things. There has to be a re-educating of our people in terms of values, in terms of ethics, and if you want to use the word civics, in being able to say, this is what a Barbadian should look like, think like, behave like, and this is what any person getting on an aeroplane or boat and leaving these shores and going to a foreign country, when he steps off at the other end, people should be able to say, that is a Barbadian. That is a Bajan. And so with those few words, sir, I hope that I was able to impress upon somebody listening the seriousness of what this bill and these changes can mean for our country. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member Mr. Michael West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple words, a couple points, perhaps. Contribution to the debate, one or two of which will speak to the obvious realities that we now face with respect to broadcasting in today's world. One or two of which may be considered to be a bit obtrusive, perhaps a little bit obnoxious, but that comes with the territory over here. Now, the bill obviously seeks in part to provide for the operations of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation in the modern era which is pretty much characterized by the widespread use of technology, which over the past several decades will have forced convergence in media, of telecoms, of imaging, of data processing, providing for the establishment of multiple platforms for broadcast and for telecommunications. Convergence would have been the dynamic outfall from the pervasive availability of technology. Functionally, therefore, entities now find the capacity to offer or produce for public consumption multiple and varied offerings of service and product. Internet has facilitated, of course, the access of many forms of information consumption on one screen. Your small handheld telephone device can now allow you to access all forms of information from most parts of the world in a moment of time. Capital has become sophisticated in the context of the changing character of telecommunications, and we have seen investment across various platforms so that the culture around broadcasts, the culture around communications has changed dramatically in your lifetime and in mine. Phone companies are now not only phone companies, they're offering you television service. and other forms of imaging for public consumption. When you were a boy, Mr. Speaker, you watched a black and white model system in your house. I think Philips was one of the brand, and some other brands which I don't remember. And if I don't remember, I'm sure you don't, because you're a little advanced of where I am, I think. But the point I'm making is that the whole world of broadcasting, telecommunications, would have changed significantly, principally driven by the new technologies and followed by capital which saw significant investment opportunity. That in part explains the failure, perhaps, of CBC in terms of its commercial viability, because there are so many other available alternatives. And people make use of that. CBC now is viewed as the poor man's TV. It's called My TV by some poor people. And other people have access to all forms of some people have access to all forms of viewing consumer offerings. And so CBC would have found, for this reason, and perhaps I'm sure other reasons, obvious challenge in this era. So the whole landscape for public broadcasting has changed. And with it, the whole architecture around telecommunications, imaging, data processing, all of this has changed in our lifetime, and dare I suggest, will change even more dramatically, perhaps, Mr. Speaker, before you would have been called to higher service than that which you now perform. Well, those are obvious realities. There are one or two issues which I must put on the table for consideration. I think that I see some signs in Barbados where news output through CBC seems to be filtered or censored, or at least filtered. I remember there was a time when the party now in office, and we in fact just heard the Honourable Member St. Philip West allude to it. There were times when the party now constituting the administration complained fairly loudly and frequently of the fact that CBC seemed to be not as available to the opposition then as it ought to have been. And certainly there was a truth associated with that. And I may very well be wrong, Mr. Speaker, and I stand to be corrected, but I think I am seeing some early signs that there is an approach by the CBC to the filtering of news, perhaps censoring of news output from up there. Public media is very important to democratic practice and the culture of democracy. And I will always speak from this position with respect to threats, actual and real and imminent, those perceived and now emerging, to that democracy. And CBC should never, in my view, be used by any administration in such a way as that it constitutes political or other advantage to the government of the day, to the detriment of views which are contrary or alternative to those represented in the voice of the government. Several people, and I didn't see this thing myself, but several people told me of a recent instance where there was a town hall meeting held with reference to the proposed Hyatt development on Lower Bay Street, and in the wake of the closing of the liquidation center property by means of acquisition by the government. And I saw on CBC news clips which represented some of the output from that town hall meeting. I wasn't there. I can only tell you what I saw. And persons spoke in very clear terms and very positive, optimistic terms about the development and its potential for good for Barbados. I saw no opposing or contrary opinion on the matter. So I was a little bit taken aback when, in fact, a couple of people told me that one man who represented the interests of the acquired property made a submission at the event, a submission which was interrupted by those who control the systems allowing for broadcasts and communications at the event. I saw no reference to any of that on CBC. What I did hear is that a representative of the liquidation center also made a submission, but I didn't see a face, I didn't hear a voice, and not one word was represented, as far as I can recall, of what was said. I did hear on Voice of Barbados in their 5:30 broadcast, and I think it's towards the end of the broadcast when they give you a special extended feature, a very passionate sentiment being expressed by one of the principals of Liquidation Center. Went on for quite some time, 6, 7, 8 minutes. I didn't check precisely. It was very moving, very stirring. And I offer that contrast to suggest that we must always be careful that CBC understands that news is to be balanced, and that views which do not reflect the opinion held by government, the opinion held by CBC itself, and its principles, should be restricted to such an extent that the ears of others do not derive the benefit of such exposure and such broadcasts. And I'm not going to belabor this point, and there are other instances to which I can point to honestly illustrate my view that there seem to be the beginnings of news filtering and censorship out of the CBC. I have to ask a question. The intention is not to offend. The intention is to simply suggest that issues like these must be faced squarely. They are not new issues. We want to believe with full heart that we're living in a new era and that things have changed. I have recently seen a bit of a presentation of the event called the Barbados Labour Party Annual Conference, held in recent weeks. I have seen, I wasn't invited. I have seen, I think in 2 instances, broadcast through CBC of parts or of the entire event or parts of it over extended period of time on the public airwaves controlled by CBC. Now, the question which I ask in the interest of certain knowledge is simply this, and that is that the party has the party paid for that broadcast. I would be happy to hear, yes, we have. Does the party intend to pay for that broadcast? I would be happy to hear, yes, we intend to pay. Now, this is not a news clip. This is not news out of the event. This is coverage of the event for public consumption. Now, truth be told, if the government has not paid CBC and does not intend to pay CBC, fairness and justice would dictate that the same privilege should be extended to other political parties when they hold their events. Now, CBC is financially strapped, cash strapped. We are made to understand in certain respects. And therefore, it underscores the more the need to ensure that they are paid for services which they provide. If you go across the road and you cover a party conference and you bring a clip or two from the party conference, that is news. When you carry the whole or most of the event, especially in repeated circumstances, you are broadcasting an event for the benefit of that entity and perhaps also for the benefit of the public. It's a different situation. And that is not intended to cause anybody any stress. Now, I know the honourable member from St. Michael's Southeast and leader of government business here is not the ultimate voice on matters of broadcasting. But if she perhaps is in a position so to do, I really would be happy to hear when I sit down and she wraps up, that she says to me, I'd want to assure the leader of the opposition, the member of St. Michael West, that yes, indeed, that was paid for, or yes, indeed, we intend to pay for that. It costs so much or will cost so much, if she is in a position to provide the information. The day may come when the positions will be reversed and you will be seeing matters from the other side as you have before. And you do not want to know that the public television service is manipulated to serve advantage to the government of the day. And that can be quite a serious matter. I have some knowledge of happenings on the other side because I used to be there. And I know, for instance, how that party, when in opposition, was disadvantaged, and significantly so, and seriously so, in the 2013 general election. Mr. Speaker, you suffered because of that, and I suffered because of that, and the party suffered because of that, and the people of Barbados, we all admit, suffered because of that. It's not a simple matter when you politicize the public broadcast media. I raise an issue, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps is also fairly sensitive, and it has to do with a number of people who were laid off at the CBC, some of whom opted for an early retirement, and some of whom held a view and have made that view public, that under the law, they were entitled to a payment of gratuity and pension, was having attained the age of 55, was having worked for a certain specified period under the law, they were entitled to such payments. And to date, as far as I know, because this matter has been in the public to some extent, on this day, they have not been paid, and that goes back several months. Now, Mr. Speaker, I hold no brief for any particular individual in any matter, whether we're talking about circumstance relative to Bay Street or relative to Bathsheba or Blackrock. I hold no brief for any individual, not a lawyer, and where I represent the interests of people or intercede on their behalf, I do not charge. So I hold no brief for anybody, but we have got to face certain realities. My understanding is that several attempts have been made to have this matter settled, and people receive what is their just due under the law, Cap 350B, that refers or relates to occupation and pension benefits. You're familiar with the legislation, Mr. Speaker, intimately so. And that once these persons would have qualified for those gratuity and pension benefits, they should have been paid. Now, this involves the CBC. It involves an insurance company in Barbados that is prominently in the news of recent times, not necessarily for the best reasons. It involves the Financial Services Commission. Mr. Speaker, I am privy to several pieces of correspondence. I'll read from this one, and it's really a communication to CBC.
Yeah, document.
I'm not going to read from it. I'm not going to read from it, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
But it is a correspondence from the Financial Service Commission to the management at CBC and the chairman of the board of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. And it refers to the fact that this is a third occasion on which we at the Financial Services Commission have addressed the CBC on this matter, and that CBC has provided the Commission notes that CBC has not provided the regulator with the requested information. That correspondence goes on to indicate, Mr. Speaker, that persons making such a claim for gratuity and pension benefits upon having reached a qualified age and having put in the requisite tenure time, Mr. Speaker, the Financial Service Commission did in fact suggest very clearly in writing confirm that the persons are entitled to these payments under the said law, to which I just referred. Now, it's been a protracted period of time that these people have been making their claims and obviously have to face their own financial commitments, etc., etc. But the settlement of this matter has been long in coming. Now, Mr. Speaker, in Barbados, it is not desirable that we see on the part of any government giant strides to dictatorship or baby steps to tyranny. Hear me carefully. It is not desirable that we see on the part of any government at any time giant strides to dictatorship or baby steps to tyranny. It is not desirable at any time that bullying becomes a part of our governance practice in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, these folks seem to feel from the public expressions made in representing themselves that they're not being treated justly. These people seem to feel that the swift hand that moves in the interests of others, that swift hand is not necessarily being moved in their interests. Some people will tell you that the move to facilitate the Hyatt development on Bay Street, and I'm not saying that I have any objection to the development, that's not the point. But the move to facilitate that is a manifestation of a swift hand. When it comes to settling the debt for poor people up at CBC who are now out of a job, and claims based on law are not being addressed speedily, that is the manifestation of the absence of a swift hand. People don't feel comfortable in the face of these types of things. There are some who would suggest that there's a heavy hand sometimes used by government, suggestive of a disposition, if not checked, very careful with my words, towards bullying, so that pensioners are left without a choice as to surrender portions of their investment in a quest to address our problems. They are the untold, painful woes of persons who fall victims to the BERT program. And some people believe, yes, we understand that government must reduce its expenditure, and so that may occasion some layoffs in the public sector. But then the question as to how it is pursued and approached becomes the issue, because persons who have just arrived on the scene, various work sites, are still on their jobs, while persons who have put in many years of hard service are sent home. Now, Mr. Speaker, these are realities which are represented to me and which I feel fall my duty to be represented here when the opportunity is given. Government success is to be measured not only in its macro, in the achievements relative to its macro performance. So we reduce the levels of debt. We adjust our debt profile. So we are not 175% debt in relation to GDP. We're 125%. So we're bringing down the debt. That's fine. And I will not even go into the matter of debating how you're achieving that. But that's fine. We are earning revenue in some respects, in some areas more than we earned before. We'll not go into whether or not you are earning it through productive activity or if it results from higher levels of taxation. That is not the point today. The point today is that you can measure achievement and success by reference to the macro performance, whether it's revenue, whether it's expenditure reduction, whether it is debt restructuring, fine. But I believe a very important measure of government success has to do with how small people feel that they're being treated, how poor people feel that they're being treated, because how they feel is important. They may not understand the realities to the extent that others do, but the fact is they feel a certain way about the pain they must experience, and they feel a certain way about the way that pain is inflicted. And these are concerns. When, therefore, you sit, Mr. Speaker, when, therefore, I sit, Mr. Speaker, to assess government's performance, the measure of success attained must bear relationship not only to those macro indicators, but to those other smaller indicators that speak to the social experience, that speak to the economic woes of poor people and of small people. And so in all that we do to change the situation at CBC, to provide for a better management structure, to provide for better platforms for product and service offerings, to provide for better culture, and even if somehow to provide for more and greater financial viability somehow, whatever we do to do those things, to accomplish those things, Mr. Speaker, we must remember that there are a number of people who for some months now have been asking for justice and who feel like that justice is being denied them because what they fairly qualify for under law and policy is not being attributed and offered to them. Those are my few remarks. As I said at the beginning, a couple of points that address obvious realities, and 1 or 2 points that may be a bit obtrusive and even obnoxious to some hearing. I thank you.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I just want to make a very brief intervention in this debate to make 1 or 2 remarks that I think are important, though notwithstanding the fact that from this place they need to be said, in my view, even if they are considered to be obtrusive and taken by some to be in some way offensive. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we cannot allow to go abroad, especially so early in the term of a young government, given such an overwhelming mandate, which, as our Prime Minister has repeatedly pointed out to the country, saddles this government with a level of public obligation and public duty, the likes of which perhaps no other previous administration has ever had, simply by virtue of the fact that we have all of the seats in the Parliament, and therefore there is an expectation from the public, and legitimately so, that we will...
Honourable Member, forgive me because sometimes I do not hear very well. So I just wanted some level of clarity just in case that you're not misleading the public.
Sorry, we won. We won.
I
Not have.
see.
We won.
Right, I see.
I stand corrected.
I just want that for clarity. That
Yes, we won. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important that the public's view be accepted by us as a government, that we have to be held to a higher standard by virtue of the fact that an overwhelming preponderance of confidence was reposed in our administration. Let us not forget, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation has for a long time been used by successive administrations, and perhaps of all the worst example was the last administration, as something of a political football. It was a propaganda tool for the last administration, Mr. Speaker, sir. What we are doing this evening, I think, takes us to a point where we should have been a long time ago. And it removes substantially the likelihood of the CBC ever again being used in that hollow and undesirable way. But, sir, we as a political party and as a government have to accept that we must, and we, certainly I, hold in the back part of my mind at all times, I know this is the position of most of the members on this front bench, if not all, that the Barbados Labour Party, when it was in opposition, was stonewalled by CBC, was shut down by CBC every time we requested airtime. An entity that was $100 million in debt, Mr. Speaker, sir, CBC then was, we offered to pay for airtime, and we were told that they turned down our advertising. An entity that's $100 million in debt told the opposition of the day, this Barbados Labour Party, of which the Honourable Leader of the Opposition was then a member, that we do not want your money because you will not have a voice. No, we went through that crucible, sir. And I think it borders on, it is unfortunate, but it borders on unbecoming of the Honourable Member. He must know the agony that the Barbados Labour Party went through is not something that any right-thinking person would lightly even contemplate inflicting on anybody else. There were those who stood on this side of the House back then and taunted us and suggested to us that the only solution is that we want to sell the CBC. Not true. That which has been posited by the leader of government business today ain't got nothing to do with the sale of the corporation. It is, sir, the reconfiguration, reimagining, the envisioning of what CBC can be for the benefit of the people of this country. That is what the leader of government business has come here today about. And I think it is unfortunate, sir, even though a flimsy attempt was made to try to provide some evidence, or what may pass as an argument for evidence, because, sir, there's nobody in the government that was present that I know of at the meeting in question. A private meeting called by a private developer to discuss a private matter. And howsoever that was dealt with should not and cannot properly be attributed to the feet of this government, sir. But I go further, Mr. Speaker, sir, because there's a very interesting coincidence of approach. You know, my memory went back automatically as I listened to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to a Barbados Today article that I read on the 25th of April this year, when a former member of the other place that ran, a member of the other place who ran against the current member for St. Andrew and lost in the last election. She was a junior minister in the Ministry of Tourism. In fact, I don't think she was the Ministry of the Parliamentary Secretary. She complained, sir, that the Democratic Labour Party was treated in a reprehensible way by the media, and that the Democratic Labour Party was not getting coverage, and it was being muzzled. We're hearing today, sir, that CBC is filtering the news. Now, back then, sir, the lady in question did not tell anybody who were the spokespersons of the Democratic Labour Party that were boycotted allegedly. She did not condescend to any particulars on what entities in the media, but the tone of that which I read then coincides with the tone of which I heard today. But what I want to hear, sir, and what I would have hoped that the Leader of the Opposition would have enlightened us on, was his position as political leader, as I assume he is, of a fledgling political party, the formation of which was carried on the same CBC, extensively on the same CBC. But this leader of a fledgling political party, Mr. Speaker, sir, has not, to the best of my knowledge, and I've traveled perhaps on government business a lot, and therefore have not heard or may have missed, but to the best of my knowledge, information, recollection, and belief, he has not spoken, Mr. Speaker, sir, to comments which are attributed to a gentleman in the other place, who he sent to the other place, indicating, Mr. Speaker, that according to the lady from who ran in St. Andrew and lost her deposit, that you have to weed out Dems from the civil service. That was her allegation. That this gentleman sent to the other place by this leader of the opposition argued that you have to weed out Dems from the civil service. Now I hear this political leader and leader of the opposition interface there to tell us anything, sir, about how people feel is important. Made a careful note of what he said because he's right. How people feel is in fact important. But it should only be important when you come in here and put your hand in your pocket and you adopt a posture that might be assumed as being holier than thou, so that you could put some jokes in a political entity forming government. In fact, the very vehicle that you came to this parliament by. Let's be fair to the process. Let's be consistent. Let us be holistic in the way in which we treat these issues. Because in your own backyard, you have a gentleman who you sent to the higher place, the upper chamber. And irrespective of how much coverage he may get or may not get, the reality is that attributed to him is a statement that is described by people across Barbados as being vile and reprehensible, to the effect that you have to weed out members of the Democratic from the Labour Party from the civil service. And I have not heard this leader of the opposition use this forum or any other to deal with that matter, sir. And then what makes it worse is that the same gentleman in the same Barbados today sought to defend himself by saying that what he said was that the LP operatives in the public service were frustrating procedures and sabotaging the government. So that was his defense. Now, to say that people who are public servants in the government of Barbados are saboteurs, Mr. Speaker, sir, is, in my view, to compound a very bad situation. I don't know how that could be voiced in your own defense. If it is saying that in defense of an allegation that I say should weed out members of the Democratic Labour Party from the civil service, my defense to that is, well, they're saboteurs. At what point does this leader of the opposition, this leader of that political party, of that political machinery that put that man in the Senate, at what point is his voice to be raised in support of those people whose feelings must be hurt? Because no evidence has been adduced. Nobody in this government has come out publicly and said that we feel that we're being sabotaged by anybody in the civil service, sir. And I find that this house is being used in a way that it ought not to be used. If it is that this is about posturing, then perhaps I have no case. But I hope, sir, that there's more to this than just posturing. I hope, sir, that the leader of the opposition has something sensible and substantive to offer beyond adopting the image of sobriety, inserting his hands into his pockets, speaking in hollowed and hollow tones, sir, but only trying to jab and joke and seek petty political points. CBC and what CBC went through, sir, is too damaging to this country. The legacy is too damaging to this country. There are too many people who have suffered scars as a result of it. The financial crisis facing CBC, sir, over $100 million is money that has to be found. The fact that people are working up there today, sir, and their pension situation is still uncertain is a challenge for this country. The fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we are talking about a station that can move beyond free-to-air when realistically all around the world people have found other modes, sir, tells us that we are dealing with a set of professional people who have been hamstrung and that they should be empowered and the best brought out of them, sir. That is the debate I wanted to have with the leader of the opposition. not to come in here when his house is made of glass, but to pelt big rocks at the government on the pretext that we got a piece of glass. And I hope I don't have to ever to come into a debate in this parliament, sir, and to remind the honourable member that that is not going to happen. He may get away with it when I, in a way, bowing here. But once I'm in here, sir, I'm going to hold him to a higher standard, because we are being held to a higher standard by the people that we have to serve. And the parliament must deserve better than this. That's my contribution.
Honourable Mr. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to join this debate and offer support for the proposed legislative changes that are necessary to strengthen the management at the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I will support any measure, any initiative to make CBC profitable, if it therefore means that you have to have certain changes in the management structure. But Mr. Speaker, before I go deeper into the debate, I also want to say that when I was in opposition, trying to win a seat on behalf of this great political party, but also to rescue the people of St. Michael West Central from the Democratic Labour Party, I too didn't get any coverage on what they refer to as the national television station. And Mr. Speaker, I understand the concerns, but I believe that this political party, the Barbados Labour Party, has a more favorable record, indeed a fair record, in ensuring that coverage is extended to all political parties and those who oftentimes don't share the same political view as this party. And we've never censored any political broadcast. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I think there was a time, and I can recall going back to 1986, when the late, great Sahar Bernard St. John was almost crucified on public television by opponents, his opponents at that time. And they were allowed, Mr. Speaker, to utilize the television station. And although the Barbados Labour Party was the government of the day, the then Prime Minister never sanctioned, never use any measure, Mr. Speaker, to avoid or to stop any political opponent from having coverage on the television, what we refer to as CBC. So, Mr. Speaker, and I go further, coverage of political events in Barbados, and it's not dissimilar, sir, to coverage of political events if you were in United Kingdom or you were in the United States. At political conventions, Mr. Speaker, in the UK and the US, you see that even those television stations that are subsidized by governments, they are there waiting to carry coverage from any political party. And that's not dissimilar in Barbados, Mr. Speaker. But they have to do so too, sir, because in the age of streaming and social media, media houses are rushing to compete. And they have to ensure that they have the competitive advantage. So, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to put that in its general broad context, because I believe it's necessary that we discuss that matter. Mr. Speaker, CBC is the lone television station in Barbados. And I can't imagine why the lone television station in Barbados, that has a monopoly of the market in Barbados, can't, Mr. Speaker, move to even break even or profitability. And Mr. Speaker, I would wish for them to move to profitability, not being a charge on the government of Barbados. Because if we can get CBC not being a charge on the government of Barbados, the people in Grisettes and Denton Road who would like the bridge fixed, Mr. Speaker, would have an opportunity to get the bridge fixed in Denton Road. But of course, I would make sure that the Honourable Member for Christchurch West does his best as I continue to help him elsewhere. He will too help me. But Mr. Speaker, I do not understand why for the life...
The honourable member was saying a significant aside to you, so pay careful attention. It could be very instrumental in latter days. The concept of a quid pro quo, be careful, sir.
Mr. Speaker, you have to be careful of that these days, sir.
The honourable member so be careful.
So there's an
That
EU
could have serious
ambassador.
criminal repercussions.
Yes, there's an EU ambassador. I'm well aware. I do follow those matters elsewhere, not too far from us. But, Mr. Speaker, I do not understand why, for the life of me, the lone television station in Barbados that has a monopoly on advertising in Barbados in respect of television can continue to cause the people of Barbados to continually fund that institution. And therefore, when the leader of government business introduced the proposed change in the bill, sir, to ensure that you move from a general manager to a CEO. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I don't have to debate that. We know the difference between the CEO and a general manager. The CEO is the person in charge of the organization, responsible for the vision to carry the institution forward. A general manager is designated in a specific area, because in companies abroad, you will have a CEO, but then you will have general managers scattered over for a specific purpose. So we understand that. And Mr. Speaker, I really hope that with the proposed change, when it becomes law, that we will be in a better position to attract, Mr. Speaker, good management talent to help us. Because, Mr. Speaker, the country continues to cry out for strong commercial skills. And that is the problem. And with this change, I am hoping, indeed, I hope that we will have stronger commercial skills in some of these entities, including the CBC. Mr. Speaker, I also believe there is a need for a critical review of the profit and loss statement of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, because technology continues to improve. But when you look at CBC, it is not that they have been strangled by lack of revenue, because they operate predominantly in a market for which they monopolize television advertising. And you can't get it better than that, sir. But the issue is that I suspect, rather, that part of the challenge with the CBC is that they have not invested substantially in capital expenditure, what I refer to as CapEx. What has been happening is that they've been having to deal with the day-to-day operating expenditure. And that is why I make the point that we need sometimes to control operating expenditure so that these institutions don't become a public charge, Mr. Speaker, on the taxpayers of Barbados. And I am a taxpayer of Barbados, sir. Mr. Speaker, so I don't believe that the issue is for a lack of resources for capital purposes. The issue, therefore, has to come now to where do we go from here. And, Mr. Speaker, we need to infuse technology in the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. I'm aware that they're going that route. And we need to make substantial investment in streaming, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition made reference to broadcast coverage. But there are political institutions, like this great political institution, Mr. Speaker, who would stream their events. Not a charge to CBC, but a charge to the political party. But they will stream their events. And I dare say, Mr. Speaker, that the time has come now for the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation to follow the lead of other media houses and start to stream. There are entities, Mr. Speaker, who are invested in media, and they too, even though they might be in the print form, they too stream, Mr. Speaker. How often you can sit back and you can see something that is likely to appear in the press the following day before you being streamed. And we have to move to that direction, Mr. Speaker, in that direction, because technology, through streaming, would deliver the content to computer users and other mobile device users, sir. Mr. Speaker, I also want to make a call. And I believe the time has come, because we have a lot of young people in this country who are very, very, very good in respect of technology. Absolutely no question about that. But I believe the time has come where we perhaps should have a special economic zone for information technology, Mr. Speaker, for those specializing in IT to advance the application of IT resources, especially in media and in social media. And I believe that if we had to go this route, it would create opportunities for creativity, but it will also create opportunities for employment. And Mr. Speaker, television networks are profitable all over the world. They are profitable, sir, because they engage in programming. Mr. Speaker, they engage in broadcasting, and we all know that a major source of revenue is what we refer to as on-air advertising. Mr. Speaker, there are some entities who have now gone to the next level, and they're using streaming. And as a result of streaming, Mr. Speaker, their revenues are derived from subscriptions. I don't want to call any entities, but we know there are several entities that go that route, Mr. Speaker. But they don't stay within their domicile, Mr. Speaker. They go beyond. So you can have a situation where perhaps you can have a streaming entity domiciled in Barbados, but transmitting across the globe, Mr. Speaker. And that's why I believe the time has come for us perhaps to look at a special economic zone for us to advance opportunities for the creative ones among us, Mr. Speaker, and we definitely need to do that. Mr. Speaker, to make television more profitable, I know that you will have to have product, Mr. Speaker. You have to go there and tell your story, Mr. Speaker. And I believe that the more content we produce in Barbados, the more opportunities we will have for a more mixed-use agenda. If we produce more programming, Mr. Speaker, you have studios in Barbados, and we've seen how they have risen over time. You have opportunities for equipment purchases, Mr. Speaker. You have opportunities for producers, editors, technicians, Mr. Speaker, animation, and it can go all the way through, Mr. Speaker. There are individuals, there are students who will go to school, they will graduate from institutions in animation and television production, Mr. Speaker. Even University of the West Indies, I have been advised that they have the creative center down there where they produce a lot of talent for Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, this is an opportunity where people can make a living and make substantial money, but if they infuse technology in terms of going forward, I think it will go a long way. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, CBC will have to control costs. It is absolutely necessary. But they will also have to create opportunities for the audience, and that's absolutely necessary. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that if the bill and the amendments to the bill, Mr. Speaker, would allow us to go forward in a new direction, by a more positive direction, I am all supportive of it. But I'm also suggesting, Mr. Speaker, that it is absolutely necessary that we have stronger commercial skills in operation, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, there will continue to be a charge, sir, on the Treasury. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition, before I take my seat, also made mention of, some outstanding amounts. But I want to say to the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Member for St. Michael West, that the Barbados Labour Party government, when they were tasked with when they had the unpleasant task, Mr. Speaker, of having to engage in retrenchment, took a bold and courageous position, Mr. Speaker. And that bold and courageous position was to ensure, unlike the last government, that the workers didn't have to wait a year, 2 or 3 years to get at least their severance, Mr. Speaker. The Barbados Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, and I can say it with authority because I am also chairman of the National Insurance Board, and I can tell you that the hard-working staff at the National Insurance Board in the severance section went to work, and they worked overtime to ensure that the workers of CBC got their severance, not within 6 months, not within 4 months, not within a year, 2, 5, or even 10 years, Mr. Speaker, that they got their severance in the shortest possible time, Mr. Speaker. I can't tell you the individual amounts, Mr. Speaker, but millions, Mr. Speaker, were paid to the workers at CBC. So even though there may be a hiccup elsewhere, Mr. Speaker, this Barbados Labour Party government did its best, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that those workers didn't have to wait as a former government, in fact, the last government did, when they sent home workers and workers had to wait for years, Mr. Speaker. In fact, some people even went to the great beyond without getting their severance benefit. Not this government, Mr. Speaker. This government did the right thing, ensuring that they got the benefit. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to detain the House, but I believe, sir, that the proposed changes are very necessary and critical for the future of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation. And like I said, Mr. Speaker, any attempt to even ask the CBC to break even in a monopoly, Mr. Speaker, will be welcome news to the taxpayers of Barbados. And I support it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and if there are other changes to be made, Mr. Speaker, time is not on our side. We have sometimes to take the urgent measures necessary, sometimes to stop the hemorrhaging, Mr. Speaker. And I see the proposed change as an opportunity for the government to stop the hemorrhaging at CBC. And like I said before, I am a taxpayer, Mr. Speaker, you are a taxpayer. And sometimes, Mr. Speaker, we pay even more than our fair share, sir. A lot of it too. So as a taxpayer, I would want to see CBC going in the right direction and not in the wrong direction. And that is the truth, Mr. Speaker. And like I said earlier, anything to reduce the losses at CBC so that the government can take the revenue that they would have otherwise had to pump into CBC and put in social and economic and infrastructure programs for the people of Barbados, but more importantly for the people of St. Michael, West Central, sir, I will support. Like I say, we're like the bridge at Denton Road fixed tomorrow, Mr. Speaker. Can't get it fixed tomorrow. But if you reduce the cost, Mr. Speaker, and the expended transfers that we have to pay at CBC, and that's a unique opportunity. It's not even like the transport board, Mr. Speaker, where you got competition. I can understand that the transfer where you have competition, Mr. Speaker, but not at CBC, sir, when you have lone television market in Barbados, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank the leader of government business for introducing the measure, to say that I support the measure wholeheartedly, and that I believe that if there are other measures necessary to be advanced at this point, to advance the cause for the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, even going to break even our profit, Mr. Speaker, I will support it. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I'm much obliged. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. George North.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I rise to spend a few moments on CBC and the changes that have taken place today. Over the years, Mr. Speaker, we have seen a number of changes made to CBC. And of course, I want to say that over the years, CBC have provided valuable service to the people of Barbados. It has been our lone station for a number of years, television station. And I would say that, as I heard mentioned when it was coming here, it is a station for the general public of Barbados. And we welcome these changes, Mr. Speaker. We welcome the changes from General Manager, CEO, and so on. But I have always held the view, and I have been in government before, opposition and government again, and we have seen, and we have talked about this before. And it is true that when the last government was in power, that we in opposition never had the opportunity to use it, the station, to me as a station to help the people of Barbados. It was helping a political party. And whenever the Democratic Labour Party is in power, CBC is used as a political football to stifle all opposition. I cannot say that this present administration is using CBC at all, because I have seen the opposition parties, I have seen persons who have various opinions other than the opinions of the Barbados Labour Party coming on CBC. And they are moving towards using their clout to destabilize this government. But I want to say that it is important for us, Mr. Speaker, to look critically at CBC at this present juncture. It is unprofitable, but then sometimes we cannot always look at the profitability based on the numbers in terms of their accounting principles. I have always held the view that we operate two community stations, one GIS and CBC. And how can a small society operate two community services, GIS and CBC? We are maintaining GIS as a station and maintaining CBC. And it was discussed over 20 years ago that CBC and GIS should be merged. You should merge the two entities where you have a station that is providing news, cultural events, and sports. But CBC, over the years, the management of CBC maintained the station as though it was a station buying news from the USA, buying news from North America and England, buying all types of a number of films, programs, all types of HBO programs, which was very costly, and which people can now use because the technology has now bypassed CBC, and we are still competing with social media. So CBC has to change, and I hope that the new management of CBC and will change its whole focus. CBC should come out of the HBO programming, come out of that and stick to news, cultural events, and sport community events. In fact, I will go further to say that CBC should be under the Ministry of Sports and Cultural Affairs. It should be. They should do community-based programming. In fact, when CBC show NIFCA, people watch it. In recent times, we have the NIFCA program. People are watching this. They want to see their children perform. When CBC show the school sports, people are watching. When CBC show cultural events and sporting events, the people are watching. And it tells us that we are not moving toward what the people want. The people want CBC to be a cultural station. We need to come out so that the whole notion that we are going down the traditional road and you are putting money at CBC years after years, it must be unprofitable. And on this occasion, we have a great opportunity to transform the station. We cannot go along the road as in past 20 years, 30 years, where we come back here next 10 years and say it's an unprofitable station. It has profitability must be based not only, as I said, on numbers, but how it treats to the people of this country. So that through education programs, the cultural programs, I believe the people of Barbados will say we are satisfied that it is providing a community-based program. Now, when I came in here, I heard the leader of the opposition speaking to the fact that there are a number of workers that were laid off previously and they have not received their severance. This is maybe true. But it is my understanding that a lot of work has been done by the government agencies to ensure that these workers are paid before the end of the year. I have heard this. And lots of work is being done to ensure that these workers are there, because they have also it came to my attention the number of workers who were laid off, and it was no fault of the present government. When we came to office, hundreds of workers were employed at CBC, and a government cannot maintain the level of employment that CBC now has. I understand it has about over 200 workers still. How can we maintain this? So something drastically has to be done. And I believe that the government has to decide that the time has come for us to put CBC as a public company where the people of Barbados will have to pay some of the, bringing the capital from the people, and persons will be able to raise enough money to capitalize, fully capitalize CBC. We have to do it. So that if government holds 51% shares and you open 49% shares to the public, this will bring in valuable contribution from the public. I also believe that the whole business environment in Barbados must change. Too many businesses are spending less than 10% on their revenue on marketing. We have to sensitize, and it means that the ministries of commerce, the ministries involved in business orientation in Barbados need, and the government itself, the whole private sector, need to work together to ensure that businesses spend more than 10% of their revenue on marketing strategies, so that this will help not only CBC but also the other cultural stations, the other stations that are involved in marketing. CBC must not see itself also only for Barbados. They must go into the CARICOM area, because our market is so small. Our market is really small when you look at it. And the type of revenue that stations earn across the world is fantastic. CBC, we are not earning enough revenue. So a station that cannot earn revenue cannot sustain itself, and government has to spend money every year to upkeep CBC. So that, Mr. Speaker, the CBC itself, I welcome these changes, but we have to go beyond these changes. And a study must be done at this point in time by government. We cannot wait for another 5 or 6 years to come back here to tell us that CBC is making further losses. Are you going to come back here? The government is going to come back here to tell us that even when you change from the general manager to CEO, and of course, there might be some substantial changes there, but we'll wait and see. You need real change, and real change must be done, if not now, in the future. A study must be done at CBC, and the whole information system, the Ministry of Information, must carry out a study to see how they can move the CBC and the GIS together, and how in a small society we should not be spending millions and millions of dollars on workers who may not necessarily be producing to their maximum. But these workers can be involved in other aspects of the economy. We have to do so. We cannot sustain. I mean, this is something that we went through many years ago, Mr. Speaker. This is not a new. Government after government comes in here and talk about the unprofitability of CBC, but we have to do something. And it's an incumbent of this government now to do something, not necessarily now, but in the future very soon. We have to be able to do it. And people do not like change. I know. People do not like change, but change will have to come. It has to come. And I believe that a careful study will show that it is necessary, if not now, in the near future. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank all honourable members who have contributed to this debate this afternoon, including the honourable member for St. Michael West, who, while he supported the changes to the 2 bills before the chamber, sought to cast some aspersions on the merits of this, the introduction of these two amendments to these two pieces of legislation. In so doing, sir, I want to state categorically that the allegations towards this administration, and also in particular towards the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, that there is any attempt to create a dictatorship or any tyrannical form of government, whether, as he put it, as giant strides to dictatorship or baby steps to tyranny, could not be further from the truth, Mr. Speaker. This is an administration that came to office talking about transparency, accountability in public life, and at every opportunity that this party has been given to demonstrate to the public of Barbados that it is intent on being inclusive, embracing people who may not share the same political ideology, it has done so, sir. It is therefore unfortunate that the leader of the opposition, a member for St. Michael West, would seek to cast doubts in the minds of persons listening, that whether through this political party or through an arm by means of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, would seek to censor in any way whether individuals or organizations or companies within this country. Sir, that could not be further from the truth. It is true that the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation has for many years been used, as members have stated, as a political football. But I would have expected the honourable member to have given examples of situations where he himself has applied to the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation for viewing time, to be able to promote, I'm sure, the vast number of persons who are signing up for his political party, or whether he's been holding an annual conference, sir. I would have wanted to hear that he's been refused by the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation for airtime. None of that, Mr. Speaker, was led by the honourable member in this debate, and I think it is unfortunate that, as a leader of a political party, that even the inability to lay the document to which he referred in relation to persons who had not been paid to date, that even that, sir, even though I have made a request, that that in fact had not been done as well. Sir, I believe leaders of political parties and leadership in this country has to take responsibility and act responsible. And, you know, when we were in opposition, at any point where allegations were made by the Barbados Labour Party, it was substantiated by documents being laid in this chamber. It was also substantiated with the relevant evidence, and proper procedures were followed, sir. I believe that where persons are going to make any type of claim towards this administration, or generally, that they should be forthcoming in the information that is provided, so that the public can have a balanced and a fair appreciation of the facts, sir. I do not believe it is fair to this administration or to the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation for what the Honourable Member for St. Michael West sought to do this afternoon. It is quite unfortunate. He has been a member of this party. He knows what we have done in terms of what we've gone through in terms of as a party to get to this point, to be able to make sure that people of all walks of life have the opportunity to be heard, sir. And I think I can speak for all members on this side, certainly, in stating very clearly that that could never be the intention of this administration. And if it is so found that that is the case, sir, I know that all of my colleagues will speak out to denounce any form of that in public life. With respect to the payments that the honourable member indicated are still owing to former employees, I mean, I want to reiterate that it has been this administration's focus to ensure that persons will have been paid as quickly as possible where there have been challenges. It is my understanding that in the particular situation with the pensions, the last administration had not made certain contributions since 2015. And just like everything else that we've had to do on coming to office, we are in the process of cleaning up, sir. It is not an overnight process. We have been trying our best, even with respect to the National Insurance Department, to ensure that persons get their monies to correct the wrong things that the last administration did. We regret that payments cannot be made as quickly as we would like. We've dealt even with matters relating to CLICO, sir. This administration has had a track record to show the public of Barbados that we are sincere in trying to ensure that justice is done. And therefore, if persons have not received the payments, I want to give the assurance that this party, the Ministry of Finance, I know for a fact that it is before the Ministry of Finance, and in the fullness of time, a statement will be made with respect to that matter in relation to the payments for those persons whose monies are outstanding. The other issue, sir, for me is that there was also the issue raised of the broadcasting time and whether or not the Barbados Labour Party has paid for broadcasting time. Again, sir, I want to reiterate that a party that won 30 seats, of which the Honourable Leader of the Opposition would have been victorious with us just 18 months ago, is well aware that with a huge mandate such as the party had, it is our responsibility to continue to engage with the public of Barbados. That is how we came to office, sir, and upon that, I believe that is how we will continue to lead as a political party. And I want to give him the assurance that the only assurance that I am here to make, sir, is that we will continue to be open and transparent in the way in which we manage the affairs of this country. Now, I could understand if the honourable member had a problem, if we had sought through the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation to broadcast the person who is now the representative for the Barbados Labour Party who will take us into the next election. But we did not seek to do that, sir. It wasn't a case of that we went into the constituency for which he now holds the seat and we sought to broadcast a nomination, sir. That is not what we did, sir, and I want that the honourable member fully understands that this is a party that is credible in its actions and it has no intention of doing otherwise in the administration of its duties. With that, sir, I want to thank the members who have contributed. I think we are all agreed that the time has come for the reform of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation to widen the definitions, to allow it to be able to be competitive, to be able to change the structures that currently exist, to allow it to be able to manage its own affairs, and to certainly in the future be able to be profitable. And I believe we have started the process of today, certainly, of setting the tone for what is to come, not just with respect to the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, sir, but I'm sure in the fullness of time with all of the other entities that are under review, that will no doubt at some point we will see legislation coming to this chamber to be able to address as well. Those are the promises of this party, sir, and those are the promises that have been made. Those are the promises which we intend to keep. With those few words, sir, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House... Sorry, I beg to move the second... that the bill be read a second time. Yeah. Sir, I beg to move that both bills be read a second time. Or you want me to do one?
You have to do one.
Okay.
Be done.
All right.
The question is that, so you're going to move the bill. You name the bill, because it's two bills.
I beg to move, sir, the Barbados Broadcasting Corporation Amendment Bill 2019 be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Broadcasting Amendment Act...
No. You go move the chair. I
okay.
move the chair. I go not everything.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is in committee.
Clause 1.
I beg to move that Clause 1 do not stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 do now stand part.
Beg to second that.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 do now stand part.
Beg to second that.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 do now stand part.
Beg to second that.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 5 do now stand part.
Beg to second that.
The question is that Clause 5 do not stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 6 do now stand part.
Beg to second that.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 7.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 7 do now stand part.
Beg to second that.
The question is that Clause 7 do not stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 8.
Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 8 do now stand part.
Beg to second that.
The question is that Clause 8 do not stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Beg to second that.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation Amendment Bill 2019. Broadcasting Act, sir.
The question is that this act be now passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This act is now passed and so cited.
Order number 13, sir. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the House, to move the second reading of the Broadcasting Amendment Bill 2019.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question that the bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
The House is in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 do now stand part.
Beg to second that.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 do now stand part.
Beg to second that.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Beg to second that.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Broadcasting Amendment Act 2019.
Beg to second that.
The question is that this bill be now passed and cited as the aforementioned bill be now passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. This bill is passed and so cited.
Mr. Speaker, revert to government notices.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Companies Economic Substance Bill 2019, Companies Amendment Bill 2019, the Corporate and Trust Service Providers Amendment Bill 2019, the Foundations Repeal Bill 2019, Limited Partnerships Amendment Bill 2019, and the Societies with Restricted Liability Amendment Bill 2019.
Recommittal of first readings of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Companies Economic Substance Bill 2019, the first reading of the Companies Amendment Bill 2019, the Corporate and Trust Providers Amendment Bill 2019, the Foundations Repeal Bill 2019, the Limited Partnership Amendment Bill 2019, and the first reading of the Societies with Restricted Liability Amendment Bill 2019.
The question is that the aforementioned bills be read a first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Revert to government business, sir. Order number 18, in the name of the Honourable Minister of International Business and Industry, to move the second reading of the Foundations Repeal Bill 2019. Sorry.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 6:30 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chairman will be suspended until 6:30 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 6:30 p.m.